All right. So this video is going to be talking about comm success, what it takes. I didn't go through this in the other video that I made about team success because this is actually pretty like common sense in my mind, but it's also there's many levels to communication, right? So I thought I'd make a whole separate video. I'm just going to go over this pretty quick. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we have a couple clips that we're going to go through, and we'll obviously be talking about this stuff in the clips. But in the military, which is my background, we have what's called the 3Ds, which is distance, direction, description. Distance doesn't really have any value in this game, but we can still use direction and description. Direction is going to be where, like for example, if we're talking about someone on 90, that's the where, and then description would be like the who, so maybe Zofia or Ash is 90, Jaeger Malusi is 90, so that's the where and the who, which in this case would be the direction description. Map knowledge, in order to have effective communication throughout the round, you have to have like, especially if you're a new team, but I've also talked to like high up T3 teams, um, that still don't know specific call outs, or some players have like for example, I call this room boar, but other people call it different things. I call this room deer, other people call it different things. So if you have unique call outs, and that's something that you need to spend time on as a team, especially if you're bringing in new players. Very important. So map knowledge is like one of the most important things, because especially if you die in comp, there's no replay, and you should really be able to make the call out like immediately as soon as you die, based on the indicator, like the direction that the indicator is coming from in terms of the bullets. And getting that information to your team as quickly as possible and as efficient as possible is really going to aid you guys. Next thing, obviously, like we just talked about, clear call outs in a reasonable amount of time. Know how to prioritize your call outs, so in this case, if there's a drone on 90, we're just going to say like, hey, there's a drone 90. But if you're on defense and an attacker is coming in to plant or swinging in, the way that we call that out is going to be different. It's going to be a much more urgent call, or you're going to be a little bit louder over comms because other people are going to be talking, and this is information that needs to be heard, right? But if we're just talking about a drone on 90, not as important in the moment, right? So what you need this so these next couple things also, just to take into account, these are in no specific order. This is just, all this stuff is what's needed to be successful. So but anyway, what you need, what angle you're holding, what when you stop holding that angle, playing aggressive or passive. These four, pretty much every T3 team I've ever talked to like lacks in these specific areas or aspects of communication. So what we're talking about, what you need if you're attacking and you see, for example, a shield top main, then and you drone in or wherever you're droning in, then you're gonna say like to Ash or Zofia like, hey, we need to get rid of this shield on top main, right? So that's what you need. You're being direct in what you need, and that way players know how to react to that specific piece of information. Or if you're defense and you've got a guy in vault and he's watching the study door, what do you need? You need, if there's another guy, you need the other guy to be watching bar door or something like that. So you're communicating like, hey, I'm watching this angle, I need you to watch this angle. That's important stuff. And that goes right into our next part of what angle are you holding, and when you're not holding that angle. So, and a lot of times, especially like I said, I reference T3 a lot because that's where my most experience is in T3. But when you're holding an angle or when you're falling off an angle. So if you're this guy, if you're this guy in Volt and you're watching this angle, and say the guy in bar decides to change angles or whatever, who knows? We're just giving a basic example here, and he decides to look the other way or hop on cams or something, and he's not watching this door anymore, and they don't say anything. I've seen this happen in many games of VODs that I've watched, where something like this scenario happens, and then someone swings this door, shoots in, kill this guy, and they get shot in the back because maybe they're in a bad position or whatever, and then they're sitting there thinking like, I thought this guy was watching this angle. So that's very important information that people overlook, is what angle you're holding and when you fall off of that angle, because that allows your teammates to, like we were talking about, always know how to position themselves and play off of the information so that you guys can play effectively together. And same thing with playing aggressive or passive. If you're in a post plant where you're a 2v1, one player is playing aggressive, like way out. Like for example, we could have a guy, you plant here, and the guy is playing aggressive in this room, and then you got your second guy playing passive way over here, right? So what happens is you're given the one last defender 1v1s, and he picks off this guy. He starts to defuse, which forces this guy to come out of position or whatever, just basic examples here. And then he picks off that guy and you lose the round. Because one player was playing aggressive, the other player was playing way too passive, and they weren't in positions to support each other. So that's why that information is important, is when you're playing aggressive, when you're playing passive. We're going to see all this stuff in the actual clips that we watch. But attitude, I always talk about, is very important. You always want to keep morale high. You don't want to be toxic to your teammates. You don't want to be blaming your teammates, whatever. Positivity, again, we're always trying to build each other up, build that confidence in each other, build that morale is very important. And then the last thing is acknowledgement. When we make a call out, in many cases, especially with the T3 teams, someone will say like, hey, Zofia's 90, and they'll say it maybe 2 or 3 times, and for whatever reason, like let's say we've got a guy, rotating this way, he's not paying attention to that call for whatever reason, this person swings, kills them on their rotate, and they're like, oh, I didn't know someone was 90, and then the other guy's like, hey, I called that like 3 times. So that's where acknowledgement comes into play. Some teams that I've worked with, they have a specific phrase or word that they use to acknowledge it, like heard, tracking, Roger, whatever. Something to acknowledge that they heard the call out, someone heard it, people are understanding that this person's in this position or whatever. So that's always good practice. So this is all important stuff. Again, not in any specific order, but it's all stuff that you need to be successful in terms of comms. So we'll just hop over the first clip. This is going to be a Bolo video. I'll put all the links in the description below. That way, if you want to watch the videos yourself, if you haven't seen them. And something to take into account is a lot of people watch these videos just to watch the plays, but we can really analyze and compare comms, like with, especially if you're a T3 or you're a challenger team, how you use your comms as opposed to how these people are using their comms. So this will be the first clip. And we'll check it out.
Hallway and freezer.
That box.
I'm stunned. Merc, I need some help.
Alright, so right away, like we're talking about what we need. This guy, Bolo's saying, hey, I'm stunned and I need some help. That's immediately like he's telling his teammate Merc over here exactly what he needs and what's going on with him. That way Merc understands how to play around it and what's going on over here.
No one's in big window yet. They're still bathroom. They're not pushing you pin side.
I got bathroom.
Nice.
And then we can see that pulse below achieved is giving information based on what's happening over here, which allows him to get 2 picks.
I got Buck and guitar.
Hookah ledge. Bro, can you give it up now? Can you give it up?
And that call is very important. So we see that Bolo gets 2 picks here. And immediately Achieve tells him, hey, can you give it up? So take your picks and leave. That's a big problem that we see in all all levels of play, is people overstaying their welcome. This is a huge scenario. 5v3, minute 51 seconds left. No reason to stick around. Take your picks, start playing numbers, right?
Yeah.
God damn, you're so fucking good at the game, dude.
Give it up.
Holy shit.
Ashuka.
Alright, and then the end of this clip, what are they doing? Building confidence, building morale. You're so fucking good at the game. Like, that's all good stuff. We want to hear that stuff, right? So that's all. That's the first clip. Next clip will be in this video as well, which is 749.
Got them. I got 90 and a bar.
Alright, we'll go back just
What's that
slightly.
book?
Save the KD, dude! Save it!
Dude, they ran out below.
Watch that book scene. You see that? I got them. I got 90 and a bar.
Alright, so again, talking direction. He got 90 in bar. Obviously, he didn't call out who he got, but that's fine. We still got information based on where those picks were, right? Direction.
Hit it.
I'm coming up with you.
I'm in.
I'm watching. Watch score.
I'm watching books.
Alright, so immediately right after, what do you hear? where they're watching, what angles they're watching. So this allows each player to know where they need to be watching. So this guy, the Nomad, says he's watching books, so that means that Bolo automatically knows he needs to be watching Aviator, or if someone's in Vault.
I'm watching both. I'm
One's
EMP.
gonna come study.
I'm watching
I'm
Skull.
watching study. Study dead.
Okay, I'm watching Skull. Watch our 90. Watch our 90.
All right, and then he's also telling him what he needs is watch R90. Even though, and this is where acknowledgement comes into play, is one guy said which he moved. I'm not sure, we can go back and check, but he said he was watching books. I don't know if he said he was falling off this angle, and then Bolo saying watch R90, watch R90. So we'll go back just a sec just to see if he states if he's fallen off that
One's
angle.
gonna come study.
I'm watching
I'm
Skull.
watching study. Study dead.
Okay, I'm watching Skull. Watch our 90. Watch our 90.
Okay, so I assume he might be the one who's watching 90 or study. We're not sure.
Coming 90.
In AV. On single wall.
We have
Nice.
Good shit.
All right, all good stuff at the end. Everybody's telling each other good job. That's always good to hear. Next one will be 8:15. So this one specifically is the clip that I always use when I'm talking to teams because the communication and the teamwork is so good. And I think 8:15 is the next.
Desk, whenever we
clip.
get a chance.
Yep.
Ash Church's desk.
Okay, ready?
Get on this.
All right. So immediately he's telling Ash, "This is what I want. This is what I need." Ash charges the desk and Astra.
Ash Church it. Ash Church
Yeah, I'm on it. D4 down.
I charged dead.
Blue desk. I'm pushing in. I'm pushing in off this. Double up with me.
And then immediately he says, "I'm pushing in. Double up with me." So this is all important stuff, and if you think about yourself, especially in the T3 or possibly lower challenger, this is stuff that you guys aren't talking about. Like, so I've seen so many cases where someone just like makes a play just like Bolo, pushes in here, but then doesn't tell his teammates like, "Hey, I'm pushing in, double up with me." Like, that's where the passive and aggressive thing comes into play, so that your teammates know how to play around you. It's very important information to share with each other.
I'm with you.
Yeah, yo,
One coming your hallway.
90.
Hallway. Pushing you.
I want you to just cross back.
Talking about where
Still
he's
one
watching.
outside.
Jaeger was
Alright,
90.
alright.
I have flank.
Do we have any flanks? Okay.
Yeah, I have red flank.
You open the hatch, open it. You have breaches, Matt?
Always good. That's another thing is when people die, they don't necessarily say what drone they're watching. The one either Nomad or Sledge said after they died, "I've got flank cams." That way, automatically the team, what is it, Thermite, Ash, and Thatcher here. No, okay, we don't really have to worry about watching flanks. We can start doing our jobs, and if someone is flanking, then we're gonna know if they're coming because our teammate is watching it. And that's also another important thing, especially at the T3 level, is I'll go into a VOD and watch something like this, and let's say Nomad here, for example, says watching flank cams. And then this is where you got to say, I'm not watching this angle, or I'm not watching this drone anymore, or I'm flipping through drones, right? Nobody says that stuff. And so they'll be flipping through drones, or for some reason they'll hop off drones and be observing, someone playing. They'll never say it, and then the team gets flanked, and then the whole team is like, "How did we get flanked? I thought someone was watching flank cams," because they never said, "I'm not watching flank drones anymore," or "I'm flipping through drones," or whatever. They don't say that important piece of information. So that's always something that you need to be sharing.
Merc?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, open here. I gotta bring my drone down to site.
I'm holding red cam.
Open
I
it.
can breach the hatch. Watch out.
Open it. We're good. Laundry's clear. I need my shit gone, bro.
I got your
Open it.
jammer.
That's good.
EMP.
Tells him he needs that mute jammer gone. He takes care of it. I need a EMP right here. He throws an EMP on the ping. This is all important stuff, and this is all stuff that especially T3 teams are lacking in terms of communication.
We have flanks, right? We're all good on flanks?
Yeah.
Minute left.
Take them all above couch.
One guy's.
There's a whole above couch.
Okay, we're good. I'm joining.
I breached above.
Dude, push launch your door. Launch your door. Peeking, launch your door.
I'm coming. Oh, no, don't peek. I'm going.
See that? He understands based on that call out that he can make this play, and he doesn't want someone else on his team to die because they have to put themselves in a worse position to take this fight. So automatically he says, don't peek, because he can take care of this. So important.
Going couches.
I'm here.
Okay, he's in between.
Well, mine's looking
He's
up
dead.
forward.
Okay, I'm here.
Because you can imagine, in some games, the Thermite here would have tried to peek the laundry door and got picked, and that would have been such a waste, right? But because he said, don't peek, I can, like, and he's telling his teammate he can take care of it, it was such a better play.
Okay.
Yeah, we can beat this. I can beat the plan, okay?
Yo, I'm gonna see if I can go memo.
It's canceled, I'm pretty sure.
No, it's not castled.
Okay,
Yo,
we're
one
good.
guy's offside.
35 seconds.
Yeah, y'all need to slay.
Yeah.
Don't try
Yeah,
to
I'm going memo side.
We're good. Yeah, there's one.
And this is another thing, when I'm in watching especially T3 VODs and going over comms with players, I think it's because they're still in the ranked mindset, but in my mind, their comms is not cluttered, right? I don't think it's cluttered, but I've been in doing comms or VOD review and going over comms like this with people, and they talk about how their comms are cluttered, and that's because they're still in this ranked mindset of trying to sound whore and like listen to the noises going on in the game rather than listening to the information that their team is sharing. So one person is saying you need to slay because the time, right? And the other guy's saying like one person is off site, one person is off site. So they automatically know it's a 2v2 on site. And I've been in doing VOD reviews for this type of thing, and people will complain when there's callouts like this because it's too much noise and they can't hear what's going on. But what you have to understand is when you're playing for comp like this, you're not necessarily playing for sound in the game because everything in this game comes about from intel and how you act upon that intel. So there's many cases where you shouldn't be playing for sound. You should be playing on intel and what people are feeding you, and then you're playing based off of that, right? And you're thinking about the scenarios that could happen. That way you're prepared if someone swings, whatever. You know what I mean? But you shouldn't be playing just to hear what's going on in the game. You need to be playing off of what information your team is feeding you. And so some teams, especially the lower tier teams, would be thinking that these comms are cluttered, and I 100% disagree because all the information that's being shared is clear and concise. Everybody's giving good intel, and then they can act upon that intel.
Memo, there's no one memo.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm gonna jump in. Jumping in.
Double door.
Got one?
Nice you.
I'm in memo.
And again, he's constantly communicating with his teammate here, Thermite, that he's gonna jump in memo. He's telling him I'm in memo. This is all like we're talking about. This is all stuff that especially T3 teams undervalue. Is all these pieces of information, because all these pieces of information will allow your teammate, the Thermite in this case, to react based on what you're doing, and that allows them to play better, right? So all these little pieces add up. I always tell teams the penny concept. Pennies add up. So in terms of communication, all this communication that they're sharing is adding up and allowing them to play better at a heightened state. And then when you make, like, anything that you're doing is always like everything. Even if you're making mistakes, usually the team who makes less mistakes is going to be the team that wins, right? So these are all pennies. Like if you lack map knowledge, if your callouts aren't good, all these little pennies are going to make your team suffer. So these are all important things that you have to practice and learn together as a team, especially at the lower tier 3 levels, or if you're new to comp, or even if you're challenger. Like I guarantee if I watched challenger like VODs with where I could hear the comms, I guarantee that they're making mistakes as well.
Putty in.
Can you get that bomb down?
Play Tetris. 25. Just hold. 50.
On the clock. Going memo.
Everything they're talking about, what I'm doing, where I'm
Memo?
doing.
I got
Stop
stop.
him, stop him, you're good. Yep, damn.
I'm still watching memo.
Watch in front of me. Watch in front. Okay.
Yeah, you watch in front.
And this is exactly what we're talking about. What angles are you watching and what angles are you not watching? Bolo is saying I'm watching memo. That allows Thermite to know that he needs to watch the double door and the rotate on or whatever it's called. I can't even remember right now. Not important. Point is they're they're talking about what they're doing, and that way the other player can react to it. China. It's called China. Sorry.
Front. Pulsing?
This is an extremely intelligent play. They recognize that there's a pulse on the board and that he's pulsing, and he throws an EMP to cancel that.
I'm watching the
Why is that
China
double door? Pantry
rotate.
wall.
I'm watching
Pantry
rotate.
in
Watch
China.
door. Watch door.
And so this is where they recognize that no one's coming on carpet out there. So now they're doubling up with the crossfire. He's telling his teammate, watch the double door, and he's watching the rotate here. This is all important information.
Still door.
Trying to rotate. Nice. Last one pantry. In, through.
One shot.
Tetris.
operator.
Let's go.
Nice!
Let's go.
Good job, Bo.
And then see in the end, we're talking about good job, building each other up, building up that confidence. This is everything that we're talking about. And as you can see, I guarantee if you look at these, you know, compilations or whatever you want to call them, these videos, these highlight videos, a lot of people, whenever they watch them, are only looking at the plays being made, and they're not looking at what value they can learn from this stuff. So I guarantee, especially if you're a T3 team watching this, or even challenger teams watching this, that when you watch this, and then if you as a team go into your VODs and watch your like a VOD and listen to your comms, you're gonna see how much more information that they're giving. And not only is it more information, but it's concise information. It's quick, and it's exactly what's going on and what they need, blah blah blah, compared to like a T3 team who is saying like, hey, this guy's over there or whatever. Like everything that they're giving is important information so that each player can play around each other and play at the most like high level as possible, because they all have information, they all know what they're doing, and you can also notice that no one's being toxic in here. All right, so that's it for the Bolo videos, I believe. Yeah, so the next one we have is a Dark Zero video. They got their hot mics thing going on. So this will be the next one, and it's the first clip. I think it's pretty it's almost the whole round here.
Can you cover
Okay.
R2? Like, can they play it?
Yeah, they could technically. I have a shield on it though. I think he's 90 though. He's 90.
But immediately we say, can you cover this? Can we play it? And they say yes, blah blah blah. Like again, telling what you need from your team, so that way people can play around it.
Nomad's still
Insight,
study about.
insight. Never mind. Left.
He's on repel. So,
Repelling study window, Tyler.
Yeah, I could try
I'm
to
gonna
work
go under in
something on him.
C4.
Cover 90. Cover 90. Cover Bucks
Fine.
Hall. They're opening
Ty-
vault.
Tyler's under, so he could C4 plant from under.
Are they
20 seconds.
low? Are they
20
low?
seconds. Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
Important information. They're playing this specific area. We could play a C4 from below. Another thing I want to touch on real quick is in terms of DZ compared to TSM, we can tell that their comms are much more relaxed. Not in terms of like not giving information, but they're just not like, each team is going to have a different way of doing things. They're still giving the same amount of knowledge. They're still, or I should say information. They're still giving the same amount of information. They're still, everything is very similar, but just the way that they're using their comms is a little bit more relaxed. It's not as loud. And that's fine because they're still giving the same amount of information, right? So each team, you know, some teams might be louder than other teams, blah, 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 but it's all about the amount of information you're giving and how you're giving that information, and it needs to be concise and quick.
Yes, yes, C4 it.
I'm C4ing it.
Sludge, you got me in sight?
We can't let him.
So when we're talking about direction and description, just like we're talking about the who and the where, Sledge got me in sight. They already know. The only thing I would have said is, you know, maps, for example. This would be a better call out. You know, Sledge got me insight on maps, or Sledge got me from maps. That would be a little bit more concise, so their team knows how to play about it. But either way, it's still a quick piece of information, and you could see. I mean, as soon as he died, the call out was already out. It wasn't like 2 or 5 seconds delayed. It was immediate.
Let him in then. We can't let him in. Tyler, come take
Repel
white.
in.
Come take white.
Planning back, I think. 90,
In study,
90.
in study, Nomad.
They're
I
planning.
think pushed in. Don't know.
1v3. 1v3. Ash close somewhere. He's about A-bomb or bar.
He gave the who and the where by A-bomb or bar. Something else we can notice here is they're not necessarily backseat gaming. That's another thing I see huge in T3. When your team is in a 1vx situation, you should just let them play, because especially in T3, they need to learn some lessons. Everybody does. There's no one in T3 that's like outstanding and supremely smarter than everybody else. Like, people are in T3 because of specific reasons, right? And everybody has faults of their own. but people need to gain experience through situations, and it doesn't matter what level, whether you're pro level or T3 level, you shouldn't be telling your teammates like how to play. You can give them information based on what you know, like where someone is, and then they need to be able to act and play based on them. Like you need to be, if you're on a team, you need to be able to trust your teammate to play it to their best ability. And if you've got like two people telling you like their player to do specific things or like different things, and it just gets all kinds of messed up. You guys are on a team for a reason. You guys need to trust each other. So you give the information, and then they're going to act upon that information based on how they see fit. And if they're not up to par, then that's where VOD review comes into play, where you can be like, hey, I think if you'd have done this, then you know this would have been better, blah blah blah. But in the moment, you just need to let their players play. And if it goes bad or sideways, you don't need to talk about how they misplayed it in the game. You can go into VOD review, talk about, and this is where constructive criticism comes into play, is you don't need to be bringing this guy down if he didn't clutch it, right? You need to be, after the game is over, go into VOD review and analyze it together and talk about the things that he could have done that potentially would have won it for him, and that way in the future he's a better player, right? We're not that, and that's where the whole confidence thing comes into play, and positivity is, you know, if the player loses, you just say good try, and then later on when you go through VOD review, you fix it up. But you know, that's a common issue that I see.
Find maps. Or the vault, actually.
Sounded like one was short. Yeah.
One under, I think. Sure.
All right. And so the reason why I picked this specific clip is because they did lose the round, and I'm very happy that Dark Zero put this in the video, is because a lot of players or teams only put stuff that they win in there, not necessarily stuff that they lose. But immediately we can see that they lost the round. He played it to the best of his ability, especially in that post-plant situation. And instead, no one said anything after the round was lost. They just said, nice try. And that's exactly what we're talking about. That's one of the biggest issues I see in this game overall, and I'm sure all FPS games or competitive games like this, especially in the T3 area, which is interesting to me because, you know, like I said, if you're in T3, you're in T3 for a reason, and you have, everybody in T3 has faults. There is no player that exists in T3 that is a perfect player that does everything perfectly. They either lack in comms, they lack in map knowledge, they lack in decision making, whatever it is. There's no one that's perfect in T3, and several teams that I come in to do this for, you've got a player in there who thinks he is so much smarter than everybody else, and when someone loses a round like DZ just did, then they start like being toxic to them or whatever, like, why would you do this, why would you swing that, blah blah blah. It doesn't matter, it's all irrelevant. You shouldn't be doing that. It's not good teamwork, it's not being a good team player. You just say good try like they did, you move on, and then go into VOD review later and analyze and talk about what they could have done better, so in the future they're a more educated player. I just want to make sure I touch on that point because it's very important. Alright, so next thing is a different clip. So the very last one that I think there's two here, yeah, and we're going to be going through G2 here. So first one is at 108, which we're at
51, one for each, two connector, okay?
Yeah, they got this music going on. I think it is what it is. We're just going to have to listen to it.
Nice. 151, one for each, one connector.
I'm holding
No
breach.
one-
So you can notice right away that how quick that information is out. He gave 3 callouts, so we'll go back and watch it. And this is what I'm talking about. Like any team that's in T3, I notice they spend a lot of time working on strats, which is just the wrong way to look at things. I think strats are great, right? But if you're a T3 team, the foundation of any team is teamwork, right? And so a lot of teams will spend time working on like strategy, and players don't necessarily understand like why they're holding these angles or whatever, right? They don't even build the foundation of teamwork. And one of the foundations of teamwork is communication, which is why we're going through this video. And the biggest thing is, like we talked about, clear, concise callouts. So we'll go back just a sec here and listen. He gives 3 callouts so fast based on 3 different positions of players.
Connect.
And you got to ask yourself, can you do the same thing? Like, this is such an important part of the game, and players do not spend time trying to learn this portion of the game.
Nice. 151, one breach, one connector.
I'm holding
no
breach.
one connector. 150.
And then you also see the guy say, I'm holding breach, right? That allows this Legion here to focus his energy and time on construction instead of like looking. You see a lot of times where players don't have this information and they'll be looking towards construction and then they'll 180 and be looking towards breach and then they'll look back at construction and they just keep flipping around. And that's because their teammate didn't share with them where they're watching.
51, one breach. 51 is looking through the connector window. Hold breach, someone, please.
I'm holding breach.
In connector now. Nice.
Let's go
Last one was breach.
Breach.
All right, so I will say, if we're critiquing this, after they picked off that guy and it was a 2v1, he did not need to swing into the breach guy, especially you see the time. Like, this guy is going to have to push in and then they can just get a crossfire. It is unfortunate, but all that matters is the information that we're giving in terms of this video. We're not, like, critiquing, but so like we talked about, that the guy who was dead gave so much information, which allowed the Legion to play off of that information, and then also his teammate, wherever he's located, I'm assuming red, maybe, I'm not sure, told him he's watching breach, so that meant that he didn't have to worry about his back.
Breach. I'm so sorry. Fuck.
You guys are
All right, so immediately everybody gets hyped up about it, which is like what we're talking about. We want that positivity. If we're bringing positivity and a good attitude to a team, what's going to happen? They're going to become more consistent, and that's what we need in this game is consistency. You need to consistently have good comms. You need to consistently be playing around each other, consistently be making good decisions. Like, this is all how you win games moving forward and be consistent at winning games. Is the more consistent your team is and all these little things, the pennies, then the more consistent your team will be at winning. And then the other thing to take into account is immediately, which I assume was the Legion. I could be mistaken. It could have been someone else early in the round that we didn't see. But he immediately said, I'm so sorry. And I don't know who it was. I'm just going to say in this video, I think it was Legion. And he may be saying sorry because he swung this when he shouldn't have. I don't know. Could be wrong. I could be mistaken. But that's what I imagine in my head. And if that's true, then it makes me happy taking self-responsibility for a play that he shouldn't have done. All right. And then next clip should be a straight one right after this, which is a little bit longer.
fucking insane.
I think it's like a whole round.
Main says no.
Yeah, maybe don't make.
Thermite dead.
I'm holding it.
All right, gave that information. Thermite dead, super important.
Obvious has
What-
to
what-
And then,
maybe don't make.
Thermite dead.
I'm holding a tight angle again.
all right, so we hear Pengu say, "I'm holding a tight angle." Like, obviously, we don't know what angle, and that, we got to take into account that these guys know, team cohesion is much higher, so they may know like what angles he's watching, because that's where you get into more in-depth stuff, especially if your team is together a lot longer. Is like when you're doing VOD reviews, or for example theory, we can close this real quick. If we're talking like theory and stuff, which is something that every team should do, if you're going through a strat and you got someone playing 90, then we know they're going to be watching these angles, right? So everybody, once you get more in depth with your team and more comfortable with your team, then you should take the time to understand, like, if this person's positioned here, what angles they're watching. If this person's positioned here, what they're going to be watching these angles, and that way your team can always play around each other and know what's going on, blah blah blah, all that good stuff.
Obvious has to feel close, boys.
One on the breach. Jacuzzi
Yeah.
breach.
That was
Dead.
nasty.
I'm
Del.
holding hallway.
One
Hold
windows.
No, Jake, you stay on windows.
One
and you
windows.
Just bait.
Window tagged. Might be
Nice.
down.
He's not down. He's in him shoot.
Not
John,
down.
John Hugo. We're gonna
He's
run
dead, he's
breach.
dead.
Last one breach. Last one.
And you can see how much information is being given, and then and that's the other thing is, especially in T3, a lot of information will be given like this, and then no one acts upon it, right? But you can see they give a call out, and then someone gets a pick, and it's so quick, like the way that they're working off of this information. And that also comes from trust and respect, which is what we talked about in that team success video, is when you trust your teammates, when you respect your teammates, then you're going to listen to everything that they say. You're going to react to what they say. That's a big issue with T3, is teams will give call outs. No one will act upon that information because maybe they're afraid that that information is inaccurate or whatever. So you got to trust and respect your team.
It's on Jacuzzi breach. Right side of Jacuzzi breach. Shut the
I have
cam.
hallway, please.
I have the first impact.
Yep. Let him come.
Just chill, please, guys. I have this.
I'm with
Yeah.
you, Una.
And you can hear that guy say, just chill, I have this. So that allows his team to trust that he's going to make the play, right?
Jake, when I shoot, you peek.
When I shoot, you peek. That's again what we were talking about. What you need, right? What your team needs.
He's close left.
And then look how good that teamwork is. That's cohesion right there. That guy, the Mozzie trusts, right? That when he says, when I shoot, you peek. He trusts his teammate that as soon as he shoots, he swings, double swings, and they guarantee the kill. That's good teamwork. But what is that based off of? Communication. And that's why T3 teams lack so bad, is because number one, they're making bad decisions, but number two, they never communicate effectively. We can hear the
Guys,
hype.
If you're still here,
Yeah, I'm
I'm
here.
fucking proud of that comeback. I told you after 1-5, I told you, we can still turn it around, and we did. One round at a time. We didn't panic.
All right, so and that's the last piece of this, is when you see the end here. So we can assume in this game that they were down at some point. They're losing the game, and this is where a lot of T3 teams suffer, is that they let their attitude and emotions rule their gameplay. And when we see right here, and this is a pro level team, and that's why you should be taking a lot from this, is that at this pro level, they understand, right? These guys, they were losing the game, but just because you're losing doesn't mean the game is lost. There's been many cases where teams are down, for example, 5-1, and they bring the game back and they win the game 7-5, or they push it into overtime and they win the game. Why? Because they stayed focused on what's important. They started making adaptations and playing together. They didn't get negative and like talk bad to each other and get toxic and stuff. So it doesn't matter if you're down, but immediately, what are they talking about? That means that when they were losing, they were staying positive. They said, let's just take it one round at a time and keep pushing and keep fighting, right? They didn't give up just because they were losing. They didn't get toxic with each other. Like, this is so important. So those are the only clips that I had to go over, but like I said, I thought this was important stuff because a lot of people just watch this stuff for the specific gun style or gun play, and they don't focus on the like actual important stuff like that you can learn from these videos, which is obviously the comms. So what I would suggest is, like, obviously we covered all this stuff. I'm not going to go through it again, but what I would suggest is, like we said, we want to make consistency the biggest thing in this type of atmosphere, especially teamwork. So I don't know, like, I would say take a screenshot of this and post it in your like a notes channel or something like that. And before every scrim, especially if you're a T3 team, before every scrim, like, just everybody look through this, maybe read it aloud to each other, or just everybody read it individually before your scrim. And that way, when you go into your scrim, everyone is keeping all these different things into account on what's important and how they should be communicating. And then after a week, 2 weeks of doing this every day, looking through this stuff, making sure that everybody is tracking on what should be talked about in terms of comms, then after, I guarantee after a week, 2 weeks of scrimming this, 4 to 6 times each day, going through this, then you're going to become more consistent with your comms. And then as soon as you become more consistent in your comms, then you guys are going to start playing better overall as a team, because like we're talking about, we need to build the foundations of teamwork, and the first foundation, or one of the biggest parts of the foundation, is communication. So once you guys get this stuff down, you're going to notice that your team play goes up exponentially at a much faster pace than it would have if you didn't. So like I said, I would say that everybody individually needs to either take a screenshot of this, go over it right before the scrim, or if you got a team captain, he's just going to read it aloud, like, hey, we need to focus on this stuff today, and this is the type of comms we want, and go through each one, read it aloud. That way it's fresh in everyone's mind. Do that for maybe 2 weeks, a month, and it's going to become second nature to you guys, and you're going to become so much better at a faster pace. So thank you for your time. Enjoy your day.